For the second Thursday night in a row, they're going to attempt to hold a DCCAC board meeting at the West Dallas Community Center. What remains to be seen now is whether or not a quorum will show. The meeting is about to begin.
We need 16 for a quorum. I'll read the board members who I got marked down here. If anybody else comes in, I would appreciate their coming up here and registering with me. Mrs. Arredondo, Mr. Coker, Mrs. Bessie Davis, Mr. Guerrero, Mr. Graves, Mrs. Holstein, Ms. Ann Johnson, Mr. Clover Lewis, Mr. Romy Lillard, Mrs. Lozada, Mr. Turner, Mr. Whittington, Mr. Williams. Are there any other board members here? Sorry, yes, Mr. James. That makes 14 of the 16 that we need.
I would like to announce what business transpired after the adjournment of last Thursday night's meeting. If you will recall, some of you that were present, a motion was made and passed to call a special executive committee meeting immediately following the adjournment of the meeting. At that meeting, it was approved. We didn't have a quorum. It was official.
He asked us then whether we would continue to work with his Mr. Fuller, who is his Director of Transportation, work with him in attempting to make arrangements for the necessary transportation to implement the district's desegregation court order. The board has asked me to assure him that we will continue to work with his people in an attempt to meet the requirements of the court order.
Last May, the City Plan Commission and the City Council agreed that Dallas had a problem with signs downtown. The City Council imposed a 6-month moratorium, a ban on sign building. In the 4 months since then, both the Plan Commission and the City Council have been taking a long, hard look at the laws governing sign building. Today, the City Plan Commission agreed on 2 things it wants the Council to do. In its meeting today, the Plan Commission passed a resolution calling for more stringent enforcement of laws. Plan Director Jim Schroeder estimates that almost 50% of the signs downtown are illegal. The Plan Commission wants a crackdown by police and by building inspectors on those signs. The Commission also included in this resolution some amendments to the law which they propose going before the Council. That will happen about the last of October, about the time the sign moratorium expires. Dallasites can look forward to having a lot more stringent laws now on its signs. Phil Reynolds, Channel 8 News on the Move, at the Plan Commission meeting.
Ranchers are having to register their cattle brands in Texas all over again. Under the old system, once you registered a brand with your county clerk, it was registered for good. But now, if you have a brand you want to keep, you've got to come in again to renew the registration. I wanted to know why, so I asked Tarrant County Clerk Red Cowan.
The whole purpose of it is to update and to protect the people who are in the cattle business today. And of course, there's a lot of people who want to protect their brands, even though they're out of the cattle business. It's more or less something they've inherited from their families down through the years, and they want to keep it in force. And this new law will make that possible for them to retain that brand by recording it now under the new law and refiling every 10 years.
Cattle brands are a part of our Old West heritage. They're more real than 10-gallon hats or 6 guns. This display at the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History shows the extent to which ranchers went and still go to distinctively mark their stock, guarding against rustlers. The branding irons are still being used as they were in the early days of the West. The earliest brand in the Tarrant County Register was entered on November 19, 1888, by D. Beauchamp of Aurora, Texas. The old book includes dozens of entries from the 1890s, but records before that were destroyed by a courthouse fire. Some of the brands from the past are no longer being used, but they can still be re-registered, and some of the descendants of the early ranchers are doing this to preserve just a little bit of history. In doing so, they're preserving the heritage that gave Fort Worth its nickname. This is Jay Lewis, Channel 8 News on the Move, Cowtown.
The present service, although high standard, has about an average of a 7-minute response, and they may respond as late as 15 minutes. We recommended municipal operation from 10 to 16 stations with professional city employees trained as paramedical people so that they could respond perhaps on an average of 3 minutes, feeling that the protection of public property and a fire in a house, we would respond within 3 minutes. We felt that it was just as important to respond to someone who was sick or injured within 3 minutes.
Do you not feel that a private service could give this kind of operation?
A private operation could perhaps provide this, but at considerably increased cost. They would have to acquire substations where we already have the police and the fire substations, and we already have the training facilities. We have places for them to be garaged. We already have an existing system of communications which would not need to be duplicated. We feel that we could do it for approximately $1 million a year, but the same level of service would probably cost considerably more if it were done on a private contract basis, where also they would need to make a profit.
Old-timers still talk about the fire before the turn of the century, when the entire business district of Plano burned down. Now they have a new one to talk about. Last night, 5 business establishments and the YMCA of Plano burned down to this. I talked to 2 of the victims of the fire, Doyle and Nancy Mitchell, owners of Hometown Furniture Company. Mr. Mitchell, what was your loss here?
Well, I imagine between somewhere around $40,000, $50,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. This is what it looked like before, and that's what it looks like now.
Do you know how the fire started?
It started in the YMCA, they said over there, and one guy had noticed a fire. It opened up for a meeting, and he had noticed a fire and tried himself to put it out and couldn't. And he went for help, and finally the fire department got here. Then the fire had spread so far that they couldn't control it, and then they got over into our building and started burning it down completely.
Do you know what you're going to do now?
Yes, I'm going back in the furniture business when I get time to rebuild. They rebuild here or somewhere else in town, probably.
Not even a fire like this can stop you?
No, nothing's going to stop me. Not at all.
Fire Marshal Scott Bell believes the fire probably started in what used to be the equipment room of the YMCA. He estimates the fire loss at around $100,000, with half of that being uninsured. Last night, 9 firemen required doctor's care. Today, 1 still remains in the hospital. For Channel 8 News on the Move, this is Judy Hanna in Plano.
We met last evening at the headquarters for the War on Poverty. The persons in this meeting were Mr. Zimmerman, the new president, the members of the executive committee, and the target area membership of the board of directors. The purpose of the meeting was by Mr. Zimmerman to get us into discussions, in as much as we had a breakdown in the meeting of the week before. Also, there was the request by certain of the poverty representatives to disqualify and remove a certain number of the government and community sectors from the board. We did go into an hour and a half discussion of these areas last evening.
in that area, orbiting spacecraft, of course, will go around the Earth every 90 minutes if you put it into a normal orbit. You can also put them into specific orbits where they'll be synchronous with a given location and just sit there and record data over that area. In pollution, you can see where it's coming from. With the right equipment on board, you can detect precisely what it is chemically, what its concentration levels are, how it affects the environment immediately at the end of the smokestack or the pipe or whatever it is, and in many cases 1,000 miles or more away.
If there are plans to use space as a watchdog for pollution, will it also serve as an indictment, or the data gathered, would it serve as charges?
Well, it would be as valid as the systems that are used today. That is, if this would depend on the various levels of legislature, whether they would consider them valid for charges.